Hi everybody, a lot of you have messaged me in the past asking about how to get over certain fears. It could be anything, fears of dating, fears of going to school, fears of speaking English, all kinds of stuff that lots of people are scared about. So today I did want to cover that topic, and in doing so I wanted to share with all of you something that I haven't really shared with anybody, which is one of my own personal fears that I've spent the last year or so working on, and that is in fact the fear of flying. I did not like taking planes at all. I used to have a terrible reaction. I used to start getting really panicky and sad like days before I'd have to take a flight. When I did take the flight, any little jolt, not just turbulence, just literally any sound, could send me into absolute panic, like sweaty palms and elevated heartbeat and all the rest of it. And this was probably caused when once I took a transatlantic flight from New York to London. In the middle of the flight, the plane kind of, at least I felt, it went into a nosedive for like 30 seconds, no idea why, but people were screaming, bags were falling off the racks, the service trolleys were up and down the aisles. It was a really, really bad experience. And ever since then, I was extremely afraid of flying. This obviously is no good, like all of your fears, right? They impede the way in which you lead life. In my case, I need to fly back to see my family, so I cannot be afraid of flying. Therefore, I needed to find a technique to get through it. And so today I want to share that technique with all of you in the hope that it may help you with your own fears. The first part of this technique I call knowledge is power. To be honest, a lot of our fears grow up in the gaps in our knowledge. The less we understand about something, the more we're inclined to let our imagination fill in the gaps. And as we know, the human imagination tends towards the negative. So for me, on a plane, every sound, every bump, I'm like, oh my goodness, the engine's failing, or we're going down. When obviously that's not the case. As I learned more and more about airplanes, and it was a concerted effort to learn about them, I began to be able to understand what each of the sounds represent. I'd know from a physics and science perspective how I would and should feel at different parts of the plane journey. And I also got to understand how incredibly safe plane flight is. In other words, I tried to replace imagination and irrationality with rationality. And that can apply to anything that you are scared of. And as I said in my last video in Seoul, the most dangerous thing we're likely to do in any given day is get into a car and drive or be driven to work. But just understanding is probably not enough, right? We need to move from just pure understanding, because you and I both know that in the moment when the panic starts, pure rationality doesn't necessarily save you. You do also need to break the negative connotations and connections that are formed in association with whatever it is you're scared of. And the way I try and do that is forms of visualization. I try and visualize people and scenes that make me happy and comfortable in the context that would usually cause a panic. Let me explain. I really don't like takeoffs. Really don't like them. That was the worst part of the flight for me. And as soon as I sat on the plane, I just wanted to get off because I just couldn't bear it. Even after I'd conquered the middle and the end, the takeoff was a really tough point. So what did I have to do to try and break the negative associations that had been built up in my mind over many times? Well, I needed to associate takeoff with things that would release the opposite hormonal reaction in my brain, which was, before I got on the flight, I'd spend a long time visualizing, say, happy scenes from my life taking place during takeoff. So, for example, I'd be around people that I love or doing activities that I love whilst in the plane taking off. What that does is it helps the brain prep not to just release negative emotions as soon as takeoff happens, because it also associates it with positive things in my life. So, for example, you may be afraid of spiders, and in order to get over that, you can picture, like, say, your loved ones interacting safely, friendly, laughing, smiling with spiders or in the vicinity of them. This hopefully then associates the things you're scared of with things that you love and dampens the automatic stress response that may be released by your brain on encountering it. The third and final step, on which I took it one step beyond, was to try and turn what I'm afraid of into my hobby. Now, flying, to be clear, will never be my hobby. I'm never going to like it that much. But what I need to do is try and trick my brain into thinking that it is something I love. It's amazing how easy it is to do. All I had to do with flying was, on social media, I could watch videos of people. There's a whole class of like aviation bloggers who just literally just fly around filming themselves on airplanes. And I watched them and I saw how much they loved flying. And I kept on telling my brain, yeah, you love it too, James, you love it too. I kept on telling myself. And at the beginning, of course, it was absolute nonsense. I was like, you've got to be crazy telling yourself this stuff. But after a while, As I say, if you watch it with your family, if you do it in a place where you feel relaxed and happy, and you're watching these videos or doing whatever it is you're doing, right? Again, if you're afraid of spiders, there are plenty of social media channels of people who keep spiders and talk about them super passionately. And you can see other people who are passionate about the things that you fear. And by watching more and more of those, a little bit of enthusiasm seeps into you. And before long, your brain starts to believe, maybe not so bad after all. So I try and turn it into my hobby. Having followed those 3 steps, I can say the following. Flying is not my hobby, but I don't feel the same fear about it anymore. When I'm on the plane, I feel good. From time to time, I do feel the gnawing sensation of anxiety, but because of these 3 steps, I'm able to quickly dampen it down. I engage my rational mind. I tell myself there's no problem, I know what this is. I imagine scenes and people that I love in the same situation, and it calms me down. And finally, I tell myself, you love this, James. What are you getting nervous about? This is something that you enjoy. And very quickly, my brain flipped back to a normal state. So I hope these 3 steps help you with whatever it is that you're scared about.